You do not have kids, Lauren. So you will pay me $1,450 a month. Ashley's voice cut through the clatter of silverware. My mother set her silver fork down against the china plate, producing a sharp, metallic clink that echoed in the sudden silence of the dining room. The heavy scent of roasted garlic and burnt sugar from the birthday cake suddenly turned my stomach sour. Ashley pushed a thick sheet of white paper across the linen tablecloth. The heavy cardstock scratched against the fabric, stopping right next to my wine glass. Printed at the top in bold, demanding letters was the title, Family Support Agreement. I stared at the document. I was 38 years old, and I had spent the last 10 of those years working in corporate financial compliance. Now, my younger sister was handing me what looked like a poorly drafted invoice for her life. I looked for itemized receipts, but there were none. There was just a list typed in a standard black font: daycare expenses, groceries, winter clothes, school activities, medical copays. And then, there was that very specific, very strange total at the bottom: $1,450. I looked around the table. My father, Robert, stared hard at his cloth napkin. His thumb rubbed the embroidered edge over and over, and he flatly refused to lift his head. At 65 years old, the man had spent his entire marriage shrinking himself to fit into Patricia's world. He knew they were going to do this. Sitting through the appetizers and the main course, my father had known this ambush was coming, yet he had said nothing to warn me. Patricia, the birthday woman herself, rested her manicured hand on the edge of the paper. She did not look shocked, and she certainly did not ask Ashley what on earth she was doing. My mother had orchestrated this. "You have more than enough," my mother said, her voice dropping into that calm, reasonable tone she always used when she was asking for a sacrifice. "Ashley has 3 children to feed. You only have yourself to worry about." I looked at the woman who raised me. Patricia wore her pearls and her perfectly pressed silk blouse, looking like the absolute picture of suburban grace. At 63 years old, my mother had spent the last 3 decades perfecting the art of the velvet hammer. She never yelled. Instead, she simply stated her demands as if they were universal truths, fully expecting the rest of us to bend. Behind Ashley's chair stood her husband. Kyle gripped his crystal water glass so tightly, his knuckles were stark white under the dining room chandelier. He did not say a word, just stared at the ice cubes floating in his drink, completely still, like a man waiting for a bomb to detonate. Family helps family. That was always the rule in this house. As long as the help flowed in one direction. I paid the mechanic when Ashley wrecked her first car out of high school. And I covered half the catering for her baby shower because they were short on cash. When her oldest child needed a laptop for virtual learning, my credit card was the one that swiped at the electronics store. I had handed over thousands of dollars over the years. Yet, sitting here at this mahogany table, under the judgmental gaze of my own mother, I was still being painted as the selfish older sister. "This is not a request," Ashley added, crossing her arms over her chest. "It is your fair share. You have a massive salary, and I am struggling." My hands felt cold. I reached for the edge of the table to steady myself. As someone who spent 40 hours a week hunting down financial risks and unauthorized transactions, I knew a bad deal when I saw one. There was no end date on this piece of paper. There was no clause stating the funds had to go directly to the schools or the pediatricians. The money was just supposed to vanish into Ashley's personal bank account on the 1st of every single month. And the number itself was an anomaly. $1,450 was not a round estimate. It was exact. It was calculated. Someone had arrived at this specific figure for a very specific reason, and they were trying to pass it off as grocery money. "I will not sign anything without having a lawyer review it first," I said, keeping my voice entirely level. Ashley let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "You need a lawyer to help your own family? It is a simple family agreement, Lauren. Stop being so dramatic." "If it is so simple, my lawyer will not mind reading it," I replied. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The smooth glass screen felt freezing against my palm. I dialed Nora Bennett. She had handled my real estate closing last year, and she was the sharpest attorney I knew. She answered on the second ring. I pressed the speaker button and set the phone down right next to the garlic roast. "Nora, I said, ignoring the glare my mother was shooting at me. My sister just handed me a contract demanding I pay her $1,450 every single month for child support. The line was quiet for a few seconds. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the central air conditioner. "That is a very specific number," Nora finally said, her professional tone sharpening into something much more focused. "Who exactly drafted this document?" I glanced down at the paper again. It just says, Family Support Agreement. Ashley presented it, but her husband Kyle is standing right here behind her. "Kyle," Nora repeated. "What is Kyle's full name?" "Kyle Parker," I said. Across the table, Kyle's throat worked as he swallowed hard. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, and his grip on the glass tightened even more. A single drop of condensation rolled down the crystal and hit the floor. I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard through the phone speaker. Nora was typing. 10 seconds passed in total silence. 15 seconds. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but the lawyer beat her to it. "Lauren," Nora's voice came back, tight and incredibly careful. "Did Kyle Parker ever live in Oregon?" The crystal water glass slipped from Kyle's hand. It hit the edge of the heavy wooden table and shattered against the hardwood floor, sending jagged pieces of glass, ice, and water sprawling across my mother's expensive dining rug. Ashley spun around in her chair to look at her husband. Then she slowly turned her head back to stare at my phone. "Why would she ask that?" Ashley demanded, her voice suddenly losing all its arrogant volume. Kyle did not answer his wife. He was staring at the broken glass on the floor, and his face had gone completely pale. I did not stay to help clean up the broken glass. Grabbing my leather purse from the back of the chair, I walked straight out the front door, leaving my mother shouting my name from the dining room. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, instantly cutting off the chaotic noise of the birthday dinner. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and oncoming traffic. On the passenger seat, my phone vibrated constantly. The screen lit up the dark car interior every few seconds, signaling an endless stream of messages flooding the family group chat. At a red light, I glanced down. My mother had sent a direct message, bypassing the group altogether. "Do not embarrass your sister," the text read. "You have more than enough, Lauren. Come back inside and apologize." My hands tightened on the leather steering wheel until my knuckles ached. That phrase was a ghost I could never quite escape. You have more than enough. When I was 16 years old, I spent 3 months bagging groceries at the local supermarket just to buy a pale blue silk prom dress. 2 days before the dance, my 11-year-old sister took a pair of craft scissors to the hem because she wanted to make outfits for her dolls. I found the ruined fabric in a heap on my bedroom floor, completely unsalvageable. When I cried, Patricia did not punish Ashley. Instead, the woman who raised me simply smoothed my hair and told me that my sister was sensitive. "You are strong, Lauren," my mother had said back then. "You can handle disappointment. Ashley cannot." That was the blueprint for our entire lives. My pain was manageable, and my sister's comfort was essential. Parking in my building garage took more concentration than usual. The damp, metallic smell of exhaust fumes grounded me a little as I stepped out of the car. I rode the elevator up to the 4th floor, unlocked my door, and dropped my keys on the granite kitchen island. The apartment was completely quiet, smelling faintly of the vanilla candle I burned that morning. Following the attorney's advice, I pulled the family support agreement out of my purse and laid the document flat under the bright kitchen lights. I took a clear photograph of every single page and emailed the file directly to Nora. 10 minutes later, she replied with a short text. "Do not delete anything. Do not answer their calls. Force them to put every single word in writing." My phone buzzed again in my hand. This time, the notification displayed Ashley's name. "If you refuse to help your own flesh and blood, do not bother calling yourself their aunt anymore." A cold ache settled deep in my chest. I looked up at my stainless steel refrigerator, where 3 school photos were held up by magnetic clips. 2 nephews and a niece smiled back at me with bright, innocent grins. My sister knew exactly where to aim the knife. She knew I loved those kids, and she was entirely willing to hold my relationship with them hostage for $1,450 a month, but giving in would not save them. It would only feed the machine that was currently using them as leverage. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank portal. The blue light from the screen illuminated the dark kitchen as I typed Ashley's name into the search bar. I sat perfectly still, watching the transaction history populate. The list kept going and going, stretching back across years of assumed responsibility. $500 for a summer camp deposit 2 years ago, $800 for a replacement laptop when hers broke, $200 for an emergency pediatric dental visit, birthday gifts, car repair deductibles, and grocery deliveries during tight months. I had subsidized her life for years. My family just never called it financial support because it came wrapped in a birthday bow, or disguised as a sudden emergency, or framed as a temporary favor. Just as I moved the mouse to close the browser, my phone rang loudly in the quiet room. Nora Bennett was calling back. I answered immediately, pressing the cold glass to my ear. "I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning," the attorney said. Her voice lacked the sharp, investigative edge from earlier, replaced by a heavy, deliberate calm. "Did you find something about Oregon?" I asked. Nora sighed quietly on the other end of the line. "I found something connected to Kyle. That specific number did not come from daycare costs, and it certainly did not come from Ashley's grocery budget. Then where did they get it?" "It came from a certified court order, Lauren." The morning sun glared through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nora Bennett's downtown law office. The space smelled of expensive leather and black coffee, presenting a stark contrast to the chaotic, garlic-scented dining room I had fled the night before. Everything in this room had its exact place. The attorney sat across from me behind a massive mahogany desk, her hands folded neatly over a manila folder. "You asked about Oregon last night," I said, dropping my purse onto the empty chair beside me. Nora nodded slowly and opened the folder. "Before Kyle married your sister, did he ever mention living on the West Coast?" I tried to search my memory. Ashley and Kyle got married 5 years ago. During their brief engagement, my sister had mentioned a rough patch in Kyle's past. A geographical cure he had tried in his late 20s, somewhere out west, before moving back and taking a job in medical device sales. He never talked about it, and Ashley had proudly told everyone that she was the one who finally anchored him. "He lived out there for a short time," I answered, watching the attorney carefully. "Why does it matter?" Instead of explaining, Nora slid a thick, stapled document across the polished wood surface. The paper did not look anything like the cheap printout Ashley had pushed at me during dessert. This was an official legal record, bearing a county seal from the state of Oregon. My eyes scanned the dense text, snagging on the capitalized names. Kyle Parker was listed as the respondent. Right below his name was a woman I had never heard of, a petitioner named Marissa Cole, and then my breath caught completely. The document established paternal rights and financial obligations for a minor child, currently 6 years old. "Look at the bottom of the second page," the lawyer instructed quietly. I turned the page, my fingers feeling clumsy against the heavy stock. There it was, printed clearly under the monthly support obligation section. $1,450. The quiet hum of the office ventilation system suddenly sounded like a roar in my ears. I read the number 3 times, just to be absolutely sure. My brother-in-law was hiding a 6-year-old child from a previous relationship, maintaining an entire secret life operating in the shadows of his perfect suburban marriage. And now he was trying to use my bank account to fund his legal obligations. "Does my sister know about this?" The question tasted like ash in my mouth. "We cannot be certain yet," Nora replied, leaning back in her leather chair. "But the agreement she handed you last night is not a coincidence. Someone took Kyle's exact court-ordered debt and tried to disguise it as your family duty." Anger flared hot and sharp behind my ribs. I reached into my bag for my phone, entirely ready to dial Ashley's number and shatter her pristine illusion of a husband. A firm hand covered mine, stopping the movement. Nora shook her head. "If you call her right now, you lose your advantage," the attorney warned. "If Ashley is a victim who truly believes that money is for her own kids, we need to prove it. If she knows the truth and is actively helping him hide assets, we need to prove that too. Let them talk." People who are desperate for money always reveal themselves in writing. I pulled my hand back, forcing myself to take a slow breath. And if I had signed that paper last night? Legally speaking, the family agreement might lack the proper consideration to be a fully enforceable contract, Nora explained, tapping her silver pen against the desk. You were not getting anything in return. But, if you had put your signature on that paper, Kyle and Ashley would have gained tremendous leverage. They could have used it to file a civil claim, dragging you into court, forcing you to hire a defense attorney, and draining your savings through endless legal harassment. Refusing to sign was the only smart move. My phone vibrated on the polished wood surface. The caller identification displayed my father's name. Robert had been completely silent during the birthday ambush, staring at his cloth napkin while my mother directed the execution. I answered the call and put it on speaker so Nora could hear the conversation. "Lauren," my father said, his voice sounding thin and exhausted. "Please do not upset your mother anymore. Just come over, and we can work this out quietly. Family matters should stay in the family." I looked at the certified child support order bearing a stranger's name. "Dad, did you know what they were planning before dinner started?" The line went dead quiet. I could hear him breathing, along with the faint sound of a television playing in the background of his living room, but he refused to answer the direct question. His silence was a complete confession. My father had known the trap was set, and he had simply pulled out my chair to let me sit right in it. "Do not call me again today," I told the old man, and ended the call. Nora watched me place the phone face down on the desk. She reached back into the manila folder and pulled out one final piece of paper. "There is one more problem we need to address," the attorney said, pointing to a highlighted date on the new page. "This is a notice of enforcement from the Oregon Child Support Agency. Kyle received this warning letter last Monday, stating his wages were about to be garnished. Someone drafted your family agreement exactly 2 days later." Nora closed the manila folder and handed it across the polished desk. "Everything in writing from now on," the attorney instructed, her tone leaving zero room for debate. "Do not answer their phone calls. Make them type out their lies, Lauren." I nodded, taking the heavy file. 10 minutes later, sitting in my parked car outside the law firm, I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over the digital keyboard before typing a single, direct demand to my sister. "Explain what the $1,450 is actually for." The response arrived almost instantly. 3 gray typing bubbles danced on the screen, followed by a massive wall of defensive text. Ashley listed daycare tuition, winter coats, swimming lessons, and rising grocery bills. Not a single exact number accompanied her excuses. "Send me the invoices," I replied. "Show me a daycare bill for that specific amount, and we can talk." My sister's retort arrived completely stripped of any familial warmth. "You are so cold. You have no idea what it takes to raise a family because you only care about yourself." I threw the device onto the passenger seat and started the engine. Halfway to my corporate office, another notification chimed loudly over the radio. At the next stoplight, I checked the screen, fully expecting another insult from Ashley. Instead, a message from my sister's husband stared back at me. Kyle rarely texted me directly, and his sudden appearance felt completely calculated. "Ashley is incredibly overwhelmed right now," the message read, projecting a sickeningly reasonable tone. "Just help her out for a few months. You know how she gets when she panics about the kids." Sitting at the red light, a specific memory from the birthday dinner flashed through my mind. When Ashley pushed that contract across the tablecloth, Kyle had not bothered to read it. He simply stared at the hardwood floor, his posture rigid. A person does not ignore a legal document demanding money unless they already know exactly what every single word says. "Why exactly that number, Kyle?" I typed back, keeping my response entirely neutral. He did not answer immediately. 5 minutes passed, and then 10. The silence stretched out until I pulled into my office parking garage. Finally, a new message popped up. "That is what a real family costs," he wrote. It was a clever deflection, designed to trigger my guilt while completely dodging the core question. Walking into my office, my laptop pinged with an incoming email from Nora. The attorney had run a simple properties check on the digital file Ashley sent me the previous night. The attached screenshot highlighted the document author and its origin. The family support agreement had not been created on my sister's computer. The digital footprint traced directly back to a registered user account bearing Kyle's name, originating from his medical sales corporate laptop. My sister's husband was not a passive bystander watching his wife beg for money. He was the architect of the entire trap, using Ashley as an attack dog because he knew I would struggle to reject my own flesh and blood. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into a very ugly picture, but I needed one more mistake from them to seal it completely. That mistake happened at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My phone screen lit up with a notification from our family group chat. Ashley sent a message, but the phrasing was entirely wrong for a public conversation. Kyle said if she signs it tonight, everything stops and we are safe. Before I could even process the full weight of those words, the message vanished. She deleted it, realizing she had accidentally dropped a private conversation into the main family thread. But my reflexes were trained by a decade of corporate compliance audits. I had captured the screenshot the second the text appeared. I forwarded the image directly to Nora. The attorney replied a few minutes later, bringing the entire timeline into sharp focus. Kyle received his notice of enforcement from the state last Monday, Nora wrote. Ashley sent you the digital agreement on Wednesday. Now we know exactly who is pulling the strings. Meet me at the corner cafe at noon. That was the entirety of the text message from Patricia. There was no greeting, and there was certainly no apology for the disastrous dinner. I arrived 15 minutes early, securing a small table near the back window. The heavy scent of roasted espresso beans usually grounded me. But today, it just made the lingering nausea in my stomach worse. My mother walked through the heavy glass doors exactly on time. Her signature cream cardigan draped perfectly over her shoulders, and her gold jewelry caught the overhead lights. She ordered a vanilla latte, carried the ceramic mug over to my table, and sat down with the terrifying grace of a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. Your sister is struggling, Lauren, Patricia began, bypassing any normal pleasantries. She did not bother asking how I was doing. You have a large income, and you do not have anyone relying on you. This should not be a difficult decision. I looked at the perfectly manicured hands resting on the wooden table. Did you know what that money was actually for before Ashley put the paper down? The woman who raised me took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee. Her eyes never left mine, maintaining that flat, unbothered stare she had perfected decades ago. It is for family. That is all that matters. That is not an answer, I said, keeping my voice low. Patricia sighed softly, acting as if I were a toddler throwing a public tantrum. You are the older sister. You have always been stronger than Ashley. You can absorb this. A tight, bitter knot formed in the back of my throat. You made me stronger because you left me absolutely no choice. Leaning across the small table, my mother dropped her voice into a conspiratorial whisper. She thought we were still playing by the old rules, where her quiet demands automatically became my unwritten laws. Ashley came to me crying last Wednesday. I told her to print that document and bring it to the birthday dinner. I promised her I would speak first, because I knew you would not dare cause a scene in front of your father and the rest of the family. The sheer calculation of it all hit me like a physical blow. The ambush was not a moment of desperate panic from my sister. The timing, the audience, and the emotional pressure had been meticulously designed by my own mother. She did not know about Kyle's secret child in Oregon, but she knew she was setting a financial trap, and she had used her own birthday to spring it. Nora's warning echoed clearly in my mind. Everything had to be in writing. Because of state consent laws regarding audio recordings, planting my phone on the table was a massive legal liability. I needed her to confess on the record, where she could not simply deny the conversation ever happened. I stood up, grabbing my leather purse from the adjacent chair. We are done here. Sit down, Lauren, Patricia ordered, her voice suddenly sharp. I walked out without looking back, leaving her sitting alone with her expensive coffee. Reaching my parked car, I locked the doors and immediately pulled out my phone. My hands shook slightly against the steering wheel as I typed out a direct message to her. I need you to confirm what you just told me in the cafe. You knew about that agreement before the dinner, and you planned the ambush to trap me into paying. I set the device on the passenger seat and waited. 5 minutes stretched into 10. While the silence dragged on, I opened my banking application. Navigating past the transactions involving my sister, I typed Patricia's name into the search bar. The results populated instantly, making my chest tighten all over again. Property tax reserves covered last winter. 6 months of bundled family phone bills. Deductibles for her auto insurance. I had been quietly funding my mother's comfortable suburban lifestyle for years, keeping their pristine facade intact. Yet she sat in a coffee shop, looked me directly in the eye, and called me selfish. The phone screen lit up. A new text from Patricia appeared. She was angry, and angry people always make mistakes. Yes, I knew, the message read. And I would do it again for your sister's children. If you make a big deal out of this and ruin our family, I will make sure those kids know exactly why their aunt abandoned them. She had just handed me the exact proof Nora requested. My mother had willingly weaponized my nieces and nephews to enforce a financial shakedown. Just as I took a screenshot of her threat, a second notification slid down from the top of my screen. This message did not come from my mother, and it did not come from the family group chat. It arrived from an unsaved number. Someone had sent me an image file without any accompanying text. I tapped the picture to open it. It was a screenshot of a private conversation, capturing a message Kyle had sent to Ashley days before the birthday dinner. "Your mom has to be there," Kyle's text read. "Lauren never says no to her." The unknown number blinked on my screen, holding Kyle's calculated words in a little gray bubble. "Your mom has to be there. Lauren never says no to her." I stared at the message until the backlight dimmed and my reflection appeared on the dark glass. Someone out there had access to my brother-in-law's phone records, or at least his private messages. I forwarded the image to Nora immediately and drove straight to her law office. The heavy glass doors of the firm offered a cold, air-conditioned sanctuary from the stifling afternoon heat. The attorney was already waiting in the main conference room, sitting behind a massive mahogany table that stretched out between us. The screenshot came from opposing counsel in Oregon, Nora explained, setting her tablet face down on the polished wood surface. I reached out to Marissa Cole's attorney this morning. They are preparing a massive enforcement action against Kyle, and they have been gathering digital evidence of his financial evasion. They found his text to your sister and forwarded it to us as a show of good faith. I sank into the leather guest chair. The room smelled of lemon polish and expensive dark roast coffee. They want something from us in return. They want exactly what we want, the lawyer corrected, leaning forward with a sharp, focused expression. They want Kyle to stop hiding behind his suburban facade. Marissa is willing to speak with you directly. No ambushes, no legal traps. Just a conversation between two women cleaning up his mess. My stomach tightened at the prospect. Reaching out to the woman my brother-in-law had abandoned felt like crossing an invisible, permanent line. Doing so would transform a messy family dispute into a formal alliance with a complete stranger. But remembering my mother sitting in that cafe, willingly weaponizing my love for my nieces and nephews to fund Kyle's secret life, washed away any lingering hesitation. "Make the call," I told her. Nora tapped the speakerphone button on the silver console sitting in the middle of the table. The line rang twice before a woman answered. "This is Marissa." Her voice sounded slightly raspy, completely stripped of any performative politeness. It was the tone of a person operating on 3 hours of sleep and endless cups of cheap diner coffee. "Marissa, my name is Lauren Miller. I am Ashley's older sister." A heavy sigh echoed through the speaker. "I know exactly who you are, Lauren. Kyle used to talk about your bank account like it was his own personal emergency relief fund. I guess he finally tried to tap into it. That single sentence dismantled years of carefully constructed family history. The man had been measuring my financial utility long before he ever stood at the altar with my sister. I looked across the table at Nora, who simply nodded for me to continue the conversation. "He tried to make me sign a contract for $1,450 a month," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger flaring in my chest. "He told Ashley it was for daycare and groceries." A dry, humorless laugh crackled over the line. "That is my court-ordered child support amount. He has not paid a single dime in 7 months. My son turned 6 last week, and his father sent a text message with a cartoon birthday cake emoji instead of a check." I closed my eyes, vividly picturing the 3 smiling children on my refrigerator door. Kyle played the devoted, deeply involved father at every single soccer game and school play in our town. The sheer hypocrisy of his dual existence turned my blood completely cold. How did this happen? I asked, needing to understand the timeline of his deception. Did he leave you when he met Ashley? We were never married, the mother in Oregon explained. The exhaustion in her voice deepened, pulling the ugly truth out of the past. Kyle and I dated for a little over a year. When I got pregnant, he promised to make things right. He talked about buying a house, setting up a college fund, creating the whole perfect package. Then he packed a suitcase for a supposed weekend sales conference and simply never came back. 6 months later, I saw a wedding photo on a mutual friend's social media page. He was marrying your sister. My nails dug into the leather armrest of my chair. Ashley knew nothing about this prior life. My sister was incredibly selfish, and she was currently willing to manipulate me for cash, but she would never knowingly marry a man who abandoned a pregnant woman. Kyle had built their entire marriage on a foundational, massive lie. I am not trying to destroy anyone's home, Marissa continued, her words cutting through the quiet conference room. I do not want him back. I just want my son to have the support the court ordered. Kyle treats my child like a dirty secret he can just starve out of existence. Nora tapped the table to signal her entry into the conversation. Marissa, your attorney sent over the latest enforcement notice. Can you confirm the exact date Kyle received the final warning about wage garnishment? Last Monday, the voice on the phone confirmed without a single second of hesitation. The state notified his employer and sent a certified letter to his residential address. They gave him exactly 1 week to produce the missing funds before freezing his bank accounts. The timeline clicked together with devastating, absolute precision. Monday. The state threatened to take his money by force. Wednesday, a panicked Ashley printed a family agreement drafted on Kyle's corporate laptop. Friday, my mother hosted a birthday dinner designed to publicly humiliate me into signing my name on the dotted line. The adults in this situation were treating children like disposable poker chips. Ashley was using her 3 kids as a moral shield to extract money from me, while Kyle was actively starving his hidden child to maintain his comfortable life. The only innocent people in this entire disaster were the ones too young to understand how their parents were failing them. If Kyle forces Lauren into a corner, Nora spoke up, addressing the speakerphone directly. We have metadata proving he attempted to defraud her to pay his court obligations. We can send that evidence directly to your legal team and the enforcement agency. Do it, Marissa said immediately, because you need to know exactly what he told the judge during our last mediation hearing. The conference room went perfectly silent. I leaned closer to the silver console, the cold air conditioning suddenly raising goosebumps on my arms. The pause on the other end of the line felt heavy with incoming destruction. What did he say? I asked. Marissa took a shaky breath, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled with a volatile mixture of raw anger and pure disbelief. He filed a motion to reduce his child support payments. Kyle told the court under oath that he could not afford to pay for his son because his wife's family completely depended on his income to survive. The mahogany table beneath my hands felt like solid ice. Kyle had not just abandoned his child in another state. He had legally documented my family as financial parasites to justify his deadbeat behavior to the state of Oregon. He had painted my sister, my mother, and my father as helpless dependents draining his resources, using our pristine family name to starve his own son. My brother-in-law had officially crossed the line from a desperate liar to an active, malicious predator. And he was about to find out exactly what happens when you try to hunt in my territory. Heavy rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, distorting the glowing city skyline into a blur of smeared lights. I stood in the center of the dark living room, completely ignoring the damp chill seeping through my coat. The conversation with Marissa Cole still echoed in my ears. My brother-in-law had stood in a courtroom and legally labeled my entire family as financial parasites. He used our name, our existence, to justify starving his own 6-year-old son. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I stared at the digital keyboard. My thumb hovered over the screen. A part of me wanted to send the certified court order directly to my sister, shattering her pristine illusion with a single file attachment. But Nora had advised caution. and my corporate compliance background demanded a methodical approach. I needed to offer Ashley one final opportunity to uncover the truth herself. If she chose ignorance, her subsequent actions would become her own responsibility. I typed out a single, precise sentence. Before this goes further, ask Kyle what Oregon means. Pressing the send button felt like dropping a lit match onto a trail of gasoline. I set the device face up on the glass coffee table and waited. 3 gray dots appeared almost instantly. They vanished, reappeared, and vanished again. My sister was typing frantically, deleting her words, and starting over. When the reply finally landed, the message carried zero curiosity. There was no confusion, and certainly no desire for clarity. The response was pure, weaponized defense. "Do not drag my husband into your selfishness," Ashley wrote. The phone vibrated violently against the glass tabletop before I could even process her denial. An incoming call from my sister illuminated the dark room. I tapped the green button and activated the speaker, letting her voice fill the empty apartment. "How dare you?" Her accusations blasted through the audio receiver, shrill and completely distorted. "Kyle is working 80 hours a week, trying to keep this family afloat. And you are sitting in your expensive apartment making up ridiculous conspiracy theories. You are trying to ruin my life because you are miserable with your own." I walked into the kitchen, the hardwood floor cold beneath my bare feet. "I am not making up anything, Ashley. I am asking you to have a simple conversation with the man sleeping in your bed." "He is stressed because of you," she yelled, her breath hitching in a manufactured sob. "He told me you would do this. He said you would try to change the subject to avoid helping your own nieces and nephews. The kids are going to suffer because their aunt cares more about her bank account than her own blood." She was using the children again. A dull ache settled behind my ribs, a familiar symptom of our lifelong family dynamic. But the Oregon court order had permanently cured my guilt. "Did Kyle tell you why the number had to be exactly $1,450? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly flat. Silence stretched across the cellular connection. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. I could hear a television playing loud cartoons in the background of her house, accompanied by the faint sound of a child asking for juice. My sister was standing in her kitchen, surrounded by the beautiful life she had built, staring into a massive, terrifying hole in her marriage. That prolonged silence was the sound of a woman realizing the floor beneath her feet was rotting away. But instead of stepping off the dangerous ground, she chose to nail her shoes directly to the floorboards. "That is the total cost of raising a family," Ashley finally snapped. Her voice shook violently, completely stripped of the arrogant certainty she possessed during the birthday dinner. Childcare, groceries, winter clothes. "It all adds up to exactly that much. Send me a single bill," I countered calmly. "Email me an invoice from the daycare center that matches that specific number, and I will write you a check right now." She did not have a bill. We both knew the itemized receipt did not exist. Instead of admitting defeat, the golden child of the Miller family chose a completely different weapon. "You just hate seeing me happy," she cried out. "You never wanted children, so you sit in your empty place judging my life. You do not understand what it takes to be a mother. You have absolutely no idea what real sacrifice looks like, Lauren." The line went dead. She terminated the call rather than face another logical question. My sister had possessed a clear opportunity to stop the incoming destruction. She could have walked into the next room, looked at her husband, and demanded the truth about Oregon. Instead, she chose to attack my childless status, burning down our entire sibling relationship just to keep her fragile reality intact. 10 minutes later, the family group chat illuminated the coffee table. Patricia had entered the battlefield. My mother rarely sent long digital messages, usually preferring brief commands or passive-aggressive reminders. Tonight, she typed an entire manifesto designed to crush any rebellion. "Lauren is trying to destroy your marriage because she is deeply jealous, Ashley," the message read. "She has always resented your happiness. We will not let her toxic behavior tear this family apart. You are a wonderful mother, and Kyle is a perfect father. Do not listen to her lies. We will handle the children's expenses without her bitter interference." Reading those words felt like stepping into a freezing shower. Patricia did not know about Marissa Cole. The woman who raised me had no idea a 6-year-old boy existed on the West Coast. My mother simply recognized a threat to her perfect suburban facade, and she immediately moved to neutralize it. By validating Ashley's delusion, Patricia maintained her absolute control over the family narrative. She was officially cementing her role as the enabler, willingly sacrificing my reputation to keep Kyle comfortable. I picked up the phone, the metal casing feeling warm against my palm. I typed one final response into the main family thread, ensuring my mother, my sister, and my silently observing father received the notification simultaneously. I will discuss this with everyone present, with my lawyer, and with documents. Set a time. The digital thread went completely dormant. No gray typing bubbles appeared. My father remained an invisible spectator, watching his family devour itself from the safety of his silence. Nobody dared to argue with the mention of legal counsel and physical evidence. A new notification disrupted the quiet apartment. A private message arrived from Kyle. The facade of the polite, overwhelmed husband had completely vanished, replaced by the desperate aggression of a cornered animal. "You do not know what you are doing," his text read. "If you hurt Ashley, that is on you." The threat was incredibly transparent. The architect of this entire disaster was trying to shift the blame for his impending exposure onto my shoulders. Kyle wanted me to believe that holding him accountable was an act of cruelty against my younger sister. He was banking on my lifelong habit of absorbing pain to protect Ashley from the harsh realities of the world. He genuinely thought I would back down to save her marriage. Taking a screenshot of his threatening message, I forwarded the image directly to Nora Bennett. The attorney had explicitly instructed me to gather every piece of written correspondence, and my brother-in-law was freely handing over the evidence required for his own destruction. My phone buzzed again, almost immediately. The incoming call screen displayed Nora's name. I answered the call, walking over to the large windows to watch the rain sliding down the glass. "Kyle just made his first mistake in writing," the lawyer said, her voice sharp with professional satisfaction. "We can use this to establish a clear pattern of intimidation." The mahogany table inside the law firm looked like a formal war room. Nora arranged 6 distinct manila folders in a neat row across the polished wood. The attorney moved with practiced precision, her manicured hands sorting through our accumulated leverage. We had the digital metadata proving Kyle authored the fraudulent contract. We had the certified child support order bearing Marissa Cole as the petitioner. We had the notice of enforcement from the state of Oregon. And finally, we had the printed screenshots of my family actively conspiring against me to extract those funds. "The order of execution is absolutely critical," Nora explained, tapping the heavy cardstock of the first folder. "If we throw everything on the table at once, they will panic and find a way to deflect the blame. We need to let Ashley and Patricia talk first. Give them enough rope to tangle themselves in their own narrative. Let them insist the money is strictly for groceries and daycare. Once they firmly commit to that lie out loud, we reveal the Oregon court document." I opened my laptop right there in the conference room and composed a new message. My fingers tapped steadily against the keyboard, drafting an email addressed to my mother, my father, my sister, and my brother-in-law. The text was entirely clinical. I requested a final meeting to discuss the family support agreement. The location was set for Nora Bennett's downtown office on Friday afternoon. No more ambushes in dining rooms smelling of roasted garlic. This event would happen on my territory, under the watchful eye of legal counsel. The first reply arrived before I even closed the browser window. Patricia responded with the predictable desperation of a woman losing control of her favorite puppet. "Family matters stay in the family," my mother wrote. "We do not need strangers involved in a simple misunderstanding. Come to the house." I highlighted her words, deleted the excess space, and typed a single sentence in return. That is exactly how this went on for far too long. I pressed send and closed the laptop, effectively ending the negotiation. The real shift in power happened 20 minutes later in the privacy of my parked car. I dialed the toll-free number for my primary banking institution. A pleasant customer service representative asked how she could assist me. My voice remained completely steady as I requested the immediate cancellation of 3 automated monthly transfers. Cutting off a lifetime of financial exploitation took exactly 4 minutes. I watched the confirmation emails populate my inbox one by one. The property tax reserve account for my parents was officially disabled. Patricia would have to pay her own auto insurance premiums starting next month. The bundled family cellular plan was permanently unlinked from my credit card. I did not make a dramatic announcement or send a threatening text. I simply closed the vault. However, I refused to punish innocent children for the sins of their parents. Staying on the phone with the bank representative, I established a restricted educational trust account for my 2 nephews and my niece. The parameters were incredibly strict. The funds could only be dispersed directly to accredited schools, licensed medical providers, or registered extracurricular programs. Ashley would never touch a single penny of that money. Driving back to my apartment, my phone rang through the vehicle audio system. The digital display showed my father calling. Robert had remained completely invisible during the entire digital crossfire over the past 2 days, quietly observing from the shadows. I accepted the call. The heavy sound of breathing filled the quiet car cabin. I stopped the automatic payments. I told him right away, saving him the trouble of asking. "I know," the old man replied. His voice sounded remarkably frail, carrying the weight of a husband who had spent 4 decades avoiding conflict at all costs. "Your mother is currently pacing a hole in the living room carpet. She is terrified of looking bad in front of Kyle. She should be terrified of what Kyle is hiding from her." Robert let out a long, shuddering sigh. "I should have stopped your mother years ago. When Ashley ruined your dress. When she demanded your savings for her wedding, I just sat there and let Patricia handle everything to keep the peace." He was apologizing, but it was an apology built completely on cowardice. My father still feared his wife's wrath more than he valued my dignity. He was acknowledging the rot in our foundation while firmly refusing to pick up a hammer to fix it. I ended the call without offering him absolution. The trap required patience. For 48 hours, I maintained total radio silence, ignoring the escalating notifications lighting up my phone screen. The following morning, I stood in my kitchen, pouring a cup of dark roast coffee when my phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Nora had sent a forwarded email marked with a high-priority red flag. Setting the ceramic mug down on the granite counter, I opened the attachment. The document was a formal letter of representation from an aggressive civil litigation firm representing Kyle Parker. The opposing attorney demanded I cease all communication with his client and threatened an immediate lawsuit for harassment and defamation. My stomach dropped for a fraction of a second before Nora's follow-up text arrived right below the threatening letter. "Good," the attorney wrote. "Now he has officially put himself on the record." Rain streaked across the thick glass windows of Nora Bennett's conference room, casting long gray shadows over the mahogany table. Friday afternoon arrived with a heavy, suffocating tension. Sitting next to my attorney, my hands rested flat against the cool wood surface. We waited. The heavy oak door swung open at exactly 3 o'clock. Ashley marched in first, her chin lifted in a practiced display of deep offense. Patricia followed closely behind, wearing her signature cream cardigan and an expression carved from solid ice. My father slipped into the room last, immediately taking a seat in the farthest corner and shrinking himself down just like always. Kyle Parker pulled out a leather chair for his wife before sitting down next to her. The man wore a sharply tailored navy suit, looking every bit the successful medical device salesman. He adjusted his silk tie and leaned forward, projecting complete confidence. "I want to make this very quick," Kyle announced. His tone held that fake corporate authority he loved to use to control a room. "I have already spoken to my counsel regarding the threatening emails you sent this week. My lawyer advised us not to engage, but Ashley wanted to give her sister one last chance to do the right thing." Nora did not blink. The attorney simply opened the first manila folder resting in front of her. "We are here to clarify a financial request," Nora stated smoothly. She looked directly at my sister. "Ashley, you asked Lauren for $1,450 a month. What exactly is that money for?" My sister crossed her arms defensively. "I already told her. Daycare tuition, winter clothes, groceries for 3 growing children. Everything costs a fortune right now." "Do you have the invoices with you?" I asked, keeping my voice completely level. "A tuition bill? A grocery receipt?" "I do not need to bring receipts to my own sister," Ashley snapped back. Her voice pitched higher. echoing against the acoustic ceiling tiles. "You are just trying to humiliate me." Nora slid a crisp copy of the family support agreement across the table. The paper stopped right in front of Kyle. "This document instructs Lauren to deposit the funds directly into a personal checking account," the lawyer pointed out. "The agreement does not list a single childcare provider, pediatrician, or educational institution. That is a highly unusual structure for basic family assistance." Patricia straightened her posture, preparing to defend her favorite child. "My daughters do not need a stranger evaluating their family dynamics." Ashley brought the paper because Lauren is notoriously stingy. The real interrogation was just beginning. Nora ignored my mother completely and shifted her gaze entirely to my brother-in-law. "Kyle," Nora said, her voice dropping the polite facade, "did you create or edit this document?" The salesman let out a condescending laugh. He sat back in his expensive chair, shaking his head. "Absolutely not. This is between Ashley and her sister. I stay out of their family drama." My attorney pulled a single sheet of paper from the second folder. It contained lines of highlighted digital code. "That is fascinating," Nora replied, sliding the metadata report across the mahogany surface. "Because the digital footprint of that PDF file traces directly back to your corporate user account. The document was generated on your medical sales laptop exactly 2 days before the birthday dinner." The condescending smirk vanished from Kyle's face. His jaw muscles tightened, and his eyes darted toward the door. Beside him, Ashley looked confused, glancing back and forth between her husband and the paper on the table. "What is she talking about, Kyle?" my sister asked, her defensive armor cracking just a fraction. Before the man could formulate a new lie, Nora opened the third folder. She did not slide this document across the wood. She placed the certified child support order dead center on the table, right where the overhead lights caught the official state seal of Oregon. "The monthly obligation listed on this court order is exactly $1,450, my attorney announced. Her words landed like heavy stones in the quiet room. "The respondent is Kyle Parker. The petitioner is Marissa Cole. And the beneficiary is a 6-year-old boy." A suffocating silence consumed the conference room. Patricia stared at the official document, her mouth slightly open, completely devoid of anything to say. For the first time in my entire life, my mother had absolutely no lines to deliver. Ashley reached out with a trembling hand and pulled the paper closer. Her eyes tracked across the bold print, absorbing the impossible reality. The perfect marriage she loved to flaunt was built on top of a hidden child. "This is extortion," Kyle shouted, suddenly slamming his fist against the armrest. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "That woman is crazy. Marissa is trying to extort me, and Lauren is helping her destroy our family." The cornered animal was finally lashing out. His face flushed bright red, sweating under the polished veneer. Nora calmly retrieved the final piece of evidence from the active pile. The notice of enforcement hit the table with a soft, final thud. "The state of Oregon sent a final warning regarding wage garnishment last Monday," the lawyer stated, destroying his extortion narrative with surgical precision. "You received a threat from the government on Monday. You drafted a fraudulent family agreement on Wednesday. And you sent your wife to ambush her sister on Friday." My sister dropped the court order. The heavy paper fluttered down onto the table. She turned her entire body to face the man she married. "Kyle," Ashley whispered. Her voice sounded hollow, completely stripped of its usual demanding volume. "Who is Marissa Cole?" The medical device salesman looked at his wife, opened his mouth, and closed it again. He had spent 5 years crafting brilliant excuses, but facing a certified court document and a digital metadata trail, the man finally ran out of words. His absolute silence was the loudest confession in the room. Tears spilled over Ashley's eyelashes, ruining her carefully applied makeup. She covered her mouth with both hands, realizing the family support she so aggressively demanded was meant to fund her husband's secret life. The weapon she tried to use against me had just detonated inside her own home. Patricia finally snapped out of her shock. The older woman lunged forward, desperately trying to salvage whatever piece of the broken narrative she could grab. "Lauren, stop this right now," my mother pleaded, her tone shifting from arrogant command to absolute desperation. "Your sister is a victim here." Kyle deceived all of us. You cannot blame Ashley for a mess she knew absolutely nothing about. I looked at the woman who raised me. She was still trying to shield the golden child, instantly reassigning all accountability to keep Ashley perfectly innocent. Reaching across the mahogany table, I pulled the very last manila folder toward me. The thick stack of printed screenshots and banking histories waited inside. Then let us talk about what she did know, I said quietly, opening the cover. Let us talk about what both of you chose to do when you had every single chance to stop. The conference room felt entirely devoid of oxygen. Patricia stared at the new folder resting beneath my hands, the desperate defense of her golden child dying in her throat. My mother wanted to pin every single consequence on Kyle, neatly severing his deception from her own intentional cruelty. I refused to let that happen. Pulling the first printed screenshot from the stack, I slid the glossy paper across the mahogany table. "You have to back me up," I read aloud, making sure every syllable carried the weight it deserved. "If you say it is family duty, Lauren will cave." Ashley squeezed her eyes shut. Fresh tears cut tracks through her foundation, but the weeping elicited absolutely zero sympathy from me. My sister had typed those exact words while actively planning to use her own offspring as a financial weapon. I placed a second piece of paper right next to the first. This one belonged to the woman who raised me. "Bring the paper," my mother's text message glared under the overhead lights. "I will speak first if Lauren argues." "You claimed you just wanted to help your grandchildren," I said, looking directly into Patricia's eyes. The older woman shifted uncomfortably in her leather chair, her pristine posture finally crumbling. "If this was truly about the kids, why did neither of you insist the funds go directly to their school or their pediatrician? You wanted a cash deposit, and you were willing to publicly humiliate me to get it." Reaching back into the folder, I produced a thick spreadsheet documenting 5 years of banking history. The highlighted rows detailed summer camp deposits, replacement laptops, emergency dental visits, and auto insurance deductibles. I pushed the entire stack toward my family. "At that birthday dinner, you stood right there and told me I was selfish," I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You claimed I had no idea what family meant. You do not have kids, Lauren, so you will pay me. That was your exact argument." My sister buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently as the reality of her broken life crashed down around her. "I do not have kids," I told her, the anger finally bleeding out into profound exhaustion. "That is why I will never use yours as an excuse to steal. Family helps family, Ashley." And I did. For years. You just never called it help when it came from me. Silence dominated the room. Kyle stared at the floor, completely defeated, while the two women who had tormented me finally recognized the absolute end of their reign. Nora Bennett folded her hands neatly on top of her desk. The attorney delivered the legal killing blow without raising her voice. "The metadata from the fraudulent contract, along with these text messages, are being forwarded to the enforcement agency in Oregon," Nora announced. "Mr. Parker, you can expect an aggressive wage garnishment to begin immediately. You will no longer use your wife's family to dodge your legal obligations to your son." The medical device salesman closed his eyes. The perfect suburban facade was completely dead, and the financial consequences were unavoidable. Ashley looked up, her mascara smeared across her cheeks. The golden child suddenly looked incredibly small. "Lauren, my marriage is over. Kyle has ruined everything. Please, can you just help me out for a little while until I figure this out?" "I set up a restricted educational trust this morning," I answered, establishing the permanent boundary. "I will pay for their school activities, and I will cover their medical needs directly at the provider's office. But you will never touch my money again, and I will never attend another ambush dinner at that house." 3 weeks later, the autumn air carried a sharp chill through the city streets. Kyle's corporate employer had officially processed the wage garnishment, draining his commission checks to pay thousands in back child support. Ashley filed for divorce, retreating into a remarkably quiet house, where she finally had to face her own reflections without a mother to shield her. Walking through the downtown shopping district, I held my 6-year-old nephew's hand. We were browsing the colorful displays inside the local bookstore. The boy was happily chattering about a dinosaur encyclopedia he desperately wanted to read. My phone buzzed inside my coat pocket. Taking the device out, I saw a text message from Patricia. My mother had spent the last 21 days alternating between passive-aggressive guilt trips and desperate pleas for reconciliation. "You are still my daughter," the message read, projecting that familiar, demanding weight. I stared at the glowing screen while my nephew tugged on my sleeve, pointing excitedly at a picture of a Tyrannosaurus. Taking a slow breath, I typed my final reply to the woman who raised me. "I know, but I am no longer your emergency fund." Pressing send, I switched the phone off completely and slipped the useless piece of metal back into my pocket. I turned toward the checkout counter, handed the cashier my credit card to pay for the books directly, and walked out of the store with my nephew. For the very first time in my life, the silence surrounding my family did not feel like heavy endurance. It just felt like freedom. When you grow up in a family that measures your worth by what you can provide, drawing a hard line often feels like an unforgivable betrayal. But true family support should never be a one-way street paved with endless guilt trips and emotional manipulation. You are never obligated to set your own life on fire just to keep someone else's comfortable illusions warm. Being child-free, single, or financially independent does not magically transform your hard-earned bank account into an emergency fund for adults who refuse to take accountability for their own reckless choices. You can still love your relatives, and you can still be a wonderful aunt, uncle, or sibling, while fiercely protecting your own peace and financial security. Walking away from a toxic dynamic is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of profound self-respect. It takes incredible courage to finally say no to the people who have spent a lifetime exploiting your generosity. Have you ever had to establish a firm financial or emotional boundary with a toxic family member? And how did they react when you finally stopped playing their game? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be the exact validation someone else needs to hear today.